Let's take some big story inventory of the decade that was on the Kansas City sports scene. A victory parade attended by hundreds of thousands? Check. An NFL draft move that gained a team the league's most valuable player in his second year? Check. Conference membership maneuvers that brought fear and uncertainty to local schools and broke up rivalries? Check, check, check. On this Christmas Eve edition of SportsBeat KC, presented by Big O Tires, star columnist Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian join me, Blair Kerkhoff, in discussing the impact of these stories involving the Royals, Chiefs, and KU Mizzou in Kansas State. In our estimation, these were Kansas City's biggest stories of the decade. Next week, Sam, Vahe, and I will continue our conversation and talk about some of the biggest personalities and games of the 2010s. Hope you enjoy. Vahe Gregorian and Sam Mellinger are here, and guys, I think one of the reasons to celebrate the end of this decade is I never knew what to call it in the first place. Was it the 2010s? Right. Was it the 20-teens? What was this decade called?
I just know it wasn't the aughts.
No, it couldn't be
which
the aughts.
Was the previous decade, which I struggled
That's
with also.
Very much a 20th century thing, right?
Yeah,
the
do you think they
aughts.
called it that, 100 years ago? Did they refer to it that way? I'm just angry about it all, Blair.
Finally found the thing that makes Vahe angry.
I didn't hear a fist pound. There it is. But it was a pretty eventful decade in Kansas City sports. Let's start by, we're going to talk about what we thought the biggest stories of this decade, what the biggest stories were, and some of the bigger personalities and events. Let's start with by identifying where we all were 10 years ago, and because not all of us in this room were here 10 years. Well, none of us in this room were in this building,
right?
But we weren't all with the star. Vahe, 10 years, 2010. The calendar flips from 2009 to 2010.
Yeah, I'm in year 23 or something at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I'm covering some Missouri stuff, a lot of Missouri stuff. Getting ready, just came back from the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, and was looking forward to seeing Sam in London in 2012, working for the competing Kansas City Star newspaper.
That's right. Yeah, big rivals in our Olympics coverage.
Sam, of course, you were a pup.
Yeah, I was. You know what? In 2010, March of 2010, officially, I think I got this job. But when it went from 2009 to 2010, I was a baseball writer here at the Star. Single, kidless. Got a dog in early 2010, I believe. In a loft downtown. Yeah, I mean, professionally, I'm kind of in the same spot, right? But personally, it flipped on its head for sure.
Yeah.
Blair, you still had a full nest.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. The oldest was off to college. Actually, I got to think about it. Yeah, the oldest was off to college, and the second one was a senior, I think, in high school. No, he'd just gone off to college as well. So 2 in college, daughter still in high school. They are now as far away as possible.
They really are.
They could not get far enough away from their parents. So great kids, though, and looking forward to seeing them, in most of them, during the holiday break. I'll tell you what else changed a lot over this decade is what downtown Kansas City looks like.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, 2010, I don't know if the Jones store was still up. Maybe that was already closed down.
No, it was. The only reason I know this is because I was living there, and I feel like it had just started to move away from being a dump, and it started its upswing, and there were, some more restaurants, and there were some more, Cosentino's, I think, had just opened.
I think so. Well, Power and Light had opened, and Sprint Center was open. That part of downtown the development had begun, and that had started to change the downtown vibe for sure.
Yeah. I feel like once they put a grocery store downtown, that was a mile marker for me about, people can legitimately work here without having to go, out to that Sun's Fresh or whatever, down on I-70 or the one down on Southwest Trafficway. But I mean, my God, there was zero light apartments at that point, right? all these convention hotels and all this other stuff. It's changed dramatically.
I tell you what, even coming from across the state, I would be here a couple, 3, 4 times a year, it seemed like, back in the day of the Big 12 tournament when Missouri was playing and such. But it was astonishing to see what was happening in the mid-2000s till early 2010s, whatever we're calling these decades. I mean, it was... I thought of Kansas City as an entirely different place because of it.
I think the Crossroads district is what's been amazing. That's the downtown contribution to the decades, the Crossroads district, and the streetcar, of course. Amazing growth, and who knows what we'll talk about what we think the next decade might bring a little later. But hey, so Vahe, you weren't here in Kansas City, but you were on the front lines like we all were with what was one of the biggest stories of the decade. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to identify a handful of stories that we think, well, let's be honest, I think, and I got you guys to drag you guys in here to talk about it, were the biggest stories involving Kansas City and Kansas City region sports in the last decade. And by that, I mean Chiefs, Royals, Sporting KC, the major college scene, and I know this for a fact that I covered the Rose Bowl for the 2009 season, which was played in January 2010. That was when Alabama beat Texas, right?
I was there with you.
You were there. We were there covering that game. Colt McCoy got hurt and couldn't finish. Otherwise, I thought Texas would have made it a more competitive game. But as it turns out, one thing that happened at that Rose Bowl that we didn't find out until later was then Texas Athletic Director DeLoss Dodds played golf with some ESPN executives, and that's where the Longhorn Network was hatched. And the Longhorn Network became a big factor in the kind of the landscape of sports today. But it changed. It changed the Big 12 in a big way. And so the next few years, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, were all about conference realignment. And I just remember thinking every day seemed to bring some new rumor, some different story, it was crazy. It was crazy, the attention that it received and the information that was out there. And I just, I remember, always seemed to be chasing the story. Even the people that you relied on as your good sources didn't seem to know what was going on. They were asking you for information.
Yeah. That's true.
But it really had the capacity to change Kansas City because this had always been home to the conference basketball tournament. It had always been a center of gravity for the Big 6, Big 7, Big 8, Big 12. It was not a branch town. It was a headquarter town, and because of conference realignment, because Kansas and Kansas State remained in a Big 12 that survived, and Missouri moved on to the SEC, it changed the personality, I think, of Kansas City as a college sports town. Vahe, you were covering it for the Post-Dispatch. What were your kind of vivid memories of those times?
Well, one thing that you're saying that's really ringing true with me, it's interesting. Missouri occupies a bigger part of the college sports pie in St. Louis, right? It's in that sense more prominent among, Illinois is of interest and St. Louis U, but St. Louis U is just basketball. Missouri's really St. Louis's school. That's not really the case here. I mean, it's one of them, but it's
correct.
It's not. Yet, the overall impact of that on Kansas City, I think, is much greater for the reasons you just lined up. I mean, it's part of sort of the fundamental makeup of what made Kansas City headquarters. So the story itself, chasing the story itself is a good way to put it. I always felt like we were chasing. Always felt like even our best placed sources, their headlights only went so far. Felt like some people were a little duplicitous. I feel like there was a lot of misdirection, intentional. That was part of it. It also felt like one of the things you'll hear sports writers talk about that we've all experienced is dealing with coaching searches. And those things are endless, chase your tail. There was a day where you could get somewhere on that. Now it's just complicated, but you got to fill the gaps as much as you can. And this one, but it was a coaching search on steroids for months.
Right. So, that's a great way of putting it. That's how I felt.
And the night that it finally happened, and you think about these dumb little symbols, but I was in Waco. Missouri was playing at Baylor, and there was an earthquake in Oklahoma that night, and it shook the press box in Waco. And we always thought that was a convenient little symbol to use, and the breaking news now on this. So it was a huge story, and we can talk more about the ramifications. But you're right, Blair. It was absolutely one of the stories of the decade, maybe the story of the decade in some ways.
There are a couple things that just talking about it reminds me. I mentioned the golf outing that the Lost Odds had at the Rose Bowl. The other big catalyst for it was the Big Ten announcing that it was going to expand. It was just a 3-paragraph release, but the Big Ten in that release said we are exploring expansion, and I remember that set off the fire alarms too. Who would it be? What were the teams? That's when Missouri was certainly associated with that story, and that's when Jay Nixon had his his moment where the Missouri governor said, "Well, we'd rather be associated with Northwestern than Texas Tech or something like that." This is while Missouri was still in the Big 12, and so that
Texas Tech was the school used, which takes on a different meaning now for us.
Yes, it does. But there were some hurt feelings over that. But man, it was. Those were interesting times. And listen, but before, excuse me, Vahe.
No.
The game that you covered at Wake, I remember that because the announcement from Missouri came the next day. But before that, Nebraska and Colorado had already left the Big 12. And so the Big 12 continued for a year with Texas A&M and Missouri as a 10-team conference. It was when Missouri and Texas A&M decided to leave, that's when it really looked like the Big 12 was in big trouble.
I remember there was like tangible fear almost, about that. And we've already touched on this a little bit, but like I think that was felt in Kansas City more than probably anywhere else. If you're Oklahoma, you're going to be fine. If you're Texas, you're going to be fine. But there were some institutional insecurities that came out in a really big way, because then all of a sudden it's like if you're Kansas, it's you've got this national elite whatever basketball program. But football sting, like the football didn't, at that time they weren't how they are now, but historically that football program wasn't very good. K-State, you start talking about, and Kansas both, you start talking about TV sets. That's how it became. That's how Rutgers like snookered their way into the
Maryland,
the Big Ten. Yeah.
Maryland and Rutgers.
TV set. The Rutgers is delivering that NYC market. But there was just so much insecurity from people in administrations at basically every institution, it seemed like, other than Oklahoma and Texas, where the opposite of insecurity was seeping out. I had lunch with somebody who knows what he's talking about in these things, and he said, one thing that nobody is talking about that I believe is true is that the selfishness of Oklahoma and Texas is driving the Big 12 kind of to the brink of disaster right now, the brink of extinction, or the brink of major shakeup right now. He said, "I'm telling you right now, I think the selfishness of Texas and Oklahoma is going to keep the Big 12 together, because those schools are going to realize they can't get this deal with the SEC. They can't get they can't keep the lion's share of the revenue. In the SEC is not going to let them do that. The Pac-12, or was it the Pac-10 at that point? Whatever. Yeah. The Pac is not going to let them do it. The Big Ten is not going to let them do it. And he said, so they're gonna keep this thing together because it's in their self-interest. And of course, to me at that point, like my head's spinning for all these rumors, like, that can't happen. It's gonna break up. And God, I should have written that. I would have been smart. That was a miss.
That was a smart source that you had lunch with.
It was a very smart source, and I appreciate him to this day.
One of the things that you're making me think of, Sam, as you speak about this, is that term brink of extinction or whatever.
Yeah.
So the Missouri administration, the Missouri fan, the Missouri constituency will all say that that's part of what drove their move, right? Also the resentment of Texas, which everybody in the Big 12 had, but that, we got to find our place at the table. But there were people in Kansas who felt that Missouri had misrepresented itself in how it was going to approach this, and that, sort of they were hand in hand with Kansas, and then all of a sudden they weren't. And that was a big problem, and had repercussions for years after, obviously, and maybe still to some degree does.
But for sure, in the immediate aftermath,
absolutely,
Kansas turned its back on the rivalry. Is what happened.
It did. But the question I've always wondered, and there's maybe no answer to it, is had Kansas, let's say for argument's sake, Kansas wouldn't have gone to the SEC. I don't know if that's a fit for Kansas. I'm still not sure it's the right fit for Missouri, but that's another question. But let's say Kansas got an offer to go to the Big Ten at that time, where there's fears of the Mountain West or whatever the fears were. Does Kansas take that?
Oh, yeah.
I think they would. Yeah.
So I've always wondered that. I've tried to ask.
And this idea of, well, if Kansas goes, Kansas State has to go, according to Pat Roberts or Sam Brownback, whoever was, senator then. Are you kidding? No. and that wasn't just in Kansas. That was echoing in Oklahoma. If Oklahoma goes, Oklahoma State's got to go.
Right.
Or in Texas got to go. Oh, are you kidding?
Anyway, but just I've always thought that was an interesting point of order in all this, the way the Kansas fan has looked at Missouri. And I'm not even really saying that's wrong. I get that. And Missouri didn't help itself with the stupid SEC chants and T-shirts at the Big 12 tournament that year. I thought that was, to use a term we heard earlier this week, Bush League. But it was what they did.
It captured the moment. It's how they felt about.
Yeah, and it was how they felt, right? And I don't know why they felt quite like that, but it was how they felt.
Can I tell you one other clear memory I have of like all the realignment stuff was I remember being in a staff meeting in our old building during all this, and that KU to the SEC thing, like somehow that was like a rumor for like a day and a half or whatever. And I remember just sitting there and thinking and I said this out loud, I was like, those poor KU kids, like they're gonna play a night game at Baton Rouge, and I remember Mike DeArmond was in the room and he was like, yeah, he's just fired up to see that carnage.
What's funny is that was probably a Les Miles LSU team you were thinking
of. That's
right.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, I would say all's well that ends well, but we're kind of there, right? I mean, the Big 12 survived. It added West Virginia and TCU. I think the Big 12 likes where it stands, in the scope of the college sports landscape right now. Their TV contract is going to be up in 24-25, so there'll be some negotiating going on here pretty soon. But I think Bob Bowlesby has positioned the conference they're in a good spot. The conference tournament never left Kansas City, even though it's technically played in an SEC state, but it never left Kansas City, and I think for us, selfishly, best news of all is Kansas and Missouri are going to play basketball starting next season.
Oh yeah.
So
it is funny though, just to think, and it's sort of just a fluke, right? But Big 12, it's not whole based on the name anyway, but as we've talked about as recently as a car ride to Columbia last week, how much pie do you have to add to make it worth dividing 12 ways instead of 10? And the measures out there don't really suggest that that's an easy gain. There might be a couple schools, who knows what it would be, but bottom line is the Big 12 doesn't feel it's not whole. Big 12 feels this is what they want to be.
It went through this a couple of years ago at Expansion Exploration, and it looked at schools. The first thing they learned was there was no existing Power 5 school that was interested in joining the Big 12. So they looked at Houston, Central Florida, Cincinnati, to name a few, and decided, basically we're told by their television consultants that nobody you add would bring more dollars from ESPN and Fox.
Yeah.
So that means you'd have to divide it even, add two more shares, and it's coming out of your share. So Big 12 said, no, we're good.
Yeah, and so the schools that would add more won't come.
That's right.
Right. So you're right where you should be. But I do think that it's worth noting, you just did, Blair, so I'll just underline it, that the Big 12 did navigate that whole thing about as well as it could. There, people of a certain age, and I'm one of them, will probably always see it as diminished from, I grew up with the Big 8 and then the Big 12, and it felt like that thing was going to be together forever. And I think it's diminished in some ways now forever. But financially, which is all that matters, they've navigated it better than I could have expected, and I think about as well as anybody could expect.
I'll throw a curveball in this whole thing, though. I mean, financially, you're right, and it is all that matters, and it really seems to be all that's going to drive the engine. But I mean, clearly something was lost.
Absolutely.
I still lament that. And Missouri playing games in Starkville and Gainesville and, the other Columbia and stuff. I mean.
And forming the rivalry with Arkansas, which,
yeah.
I mean, look, it is a border state, and there is a trophy, but it
just got a little bit more of a rivalry, didn't it?
Yeah, probably the only real piece to it that's like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's kind of concocted and contrived, and even obviously the first thing you think is Missouri and Kansas, but Missouri, Iowa State, Missouri K-State, all those things. That just it's been 7 years now. It still doesn't feel like these games have the currency to me. Like,
absolutely,
obviously they're meaningful, but they're not personal.
I feel that way about Nebraska as well.
That's a good way to put it.
Not being part of the conference. And so that'll circle back to the idea that at once we felt like the center of the Midwest college football universe or college sports universe, and Kansas City just isn't that anymore. So, all right, so that was the biggest story, I would say, of the first part of the decade. When we come back, we will talk about what is easily the biggest story of the middle part of the decade. We'll be right back.
The biggest sale of the year is happening now at Big O Tires. Buy 2 tires, get 2 free on select tires in stock. That's 2 free tires when you buy an alignment and tire protection package. That's 50% off tires at Big O Tires. It's going on now, but it all ends soon. Buy 2 tires, get 2 free at all participating Big O Tires. Installation additional, plus shop fee of up to 10% of non-discounted retail price, not to exceed $35. Hurry, sale ends Monday, December 23rd.
Back with Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian, and we got through the college football, college sports mess of the early part of the decade. And as that was beginning to settle down, there was a baseball team in Kansas City that was starting to heat up. And 2013 was the first year of first winning record for the Royals since the 2003 team, right? The Tony Pena team. So it had been a decade. I remember the Justin Maxwell walk-off grand slam, but of course there was the famous line after the season by Dayton Moore.
In a small way, I feel like we've won the World Series.
Yes.
Yeah. That went over like a bag of turds.
It was just a little early. That's all.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? It was one of those. I feel like I've gotten to know Dayton better than I've gotten to know anybody else on the local. So that I started covering baseball like right when he took the job, and I probably talked to him more than anybody else. I knew exactly what he meant. And as it turned out, I called him approached him after in that press conference and asked him what he meant, and it was exactly what I thought he meant. But it was too late. Even by then, that line had just been taken off, and what he meant was pure, and I agree with it. Like what he meant was that to him, a Royals game where the 8-year-old kids are coming in wearing Salvador Perez jerseys and Eric Hosmer jerseys and Lorenzo Cain jerseys is more important in a 30,000-foot view than whether you win 92 games or 71 games or whatever. Like, and I love that. I wish that everybody had that perspective, but it was a dumb thing to say.
I think you also called him later. I can't remember for sure.
He called
but
me.
He called
Because the first,
in the online world, the story was already up.
I hope I'm not giving anything away here. But,
sorry, my fault.
No,
before you got to your car.
No, this is a. Yeah, we can tell this story. I think. I wrote the column was basically the first sentence was something like Dayton Moore said a stupid thing. And then the rest of the column was trying to explain exactly what he meant and, maybe a different way that he could have said it. Because I totally understood why people ran with the other meaning, right? But I felt like it was worthwhile to try to help people understand what Dayton's a baseball guy. He's not a public speaker, here's what he was trying to say. And he was not happy when he called. And he was like, I was kind of shocked, honestly, because I felt like the column was like sort of, this is what he meant, guys.
Just the first sentence threw him a
yeah,
little.
and he was like, well, you said it was stupid. And I was like, well, felt like it was, but also trying to, say what you meant here, buddy. So anyway, that was a nice little tangent.
So we've gone pretty far into this. We're talking, of course, about the Royals of the mid-teens. I guess that's how we'll always refer to the mid-teen Royals, who had the 2013 winning record that we were just referring to, and then in 2014 and 2015 did the unthinkable. Really, I mean, I still 5 years later look back on those two seasons, especially the postseasons, and I kind of can't believe it happened. Hard to believe it happened. Vahe, you had just gotten to Kansas City. In fact,
knew nothing but winning.
It's all you knew. You'd come from St. Louis, where they had appeared. The Cardinals had been in the 2013 World Series, and you come to Kansas City. You got nothing but W's.
It is funny because I remember coming here. It was spring of 2013. I think I started June 2013, and at that point, Royals hadn't been in a postseason since '85. Chiefs hadn't won a postseason game since '94. I think we were like looking for different metrics to measure like the greatest futility in professional sports. But it was kind of a magical turn time, right? I mean, Andy Reid, obviously, with the Chiefs. We'll get into that later. But the thing that was interesting to me, and this is what happens sometimes with just a fresh set of eyes, not necessarily Pollyanna eyes, but you're coming in and you see, looks like a fairly decent team. But also you see, like, the way people react to anything, like the way people reacted to Ned. Like, he had a pretty good line that season. It was the third base tree line. Mm-hmm. About, you can't just get a guy off a third base tree. I thought it was really funny, and people were just ridiculing him. You might have ridiculed him. I don't know. I thought it was a great line.
I might have. I don't know.
Chances are.
I'm just thinking out loud.
I remember the big graphic we had in the paper that day of the third base tree.
Was there?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe a Sam column accompanied that.
Listen, we got a graphic. Can you write a column that fits the graphic? But no, the point is, though, when you come in, you're just sort of seeing it with an open mind because you haven't been bludgeoned by 28 years of losing. It's like, oh, they look like they could be okay. But I thought it would only ever be in baby steps. Like, it's amazing they made the wild card game. They're going to the wild card game. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then everything.
I just remember one of the talking points entering the wild card game was, well, the Royals qualified for the postseason, but does that even count?
Right.
Would that count as could they throw up a flag in the outfield to join the 70s and 80s flags just if they made the wild card? And they didn't win anything. They didn't win a division. Haven't won anything.
I remember
did not play in October.
Did not. That's right. That game was on September 28th.
Yeah.
Didn't even get to October.
Right. And Ned was saying after the fact. I don't remember him saying it before the fact, but after the fact that he wouldn't have considered that a playoff. Them being in the postseason.
I'm pretty sure he did not ever say that before.
Pretty sure too. Yeah, it was kind of a convenient thing to be able to say later.
Yeah, that turned out that was maybe the best game. Just the context of everything that it meant too. That was maybe the most thrilling game that I've ever seen in person. And I remember talking to Rene Francisco on the first floor. The elevators go down and right by the clubhouses. And I asked him something about, like, you got a feeling about the game tonight? And he said, I think Salvy's going to have a big moment.
I didn't remember that you saying that before. That's great.
He said that. I texted him after. It's just the whole game, though. I mean, it was the lead up to Salvy was incredible.
Well, not only that, but I do recall that you had you were down the road on your Firing Ned column.
that couple paragraphs in.
That's right.
The first of so many Control A deletes from 2014.
Hopefully saved someplace else just in case.
Jeff Passett, our friend and former coworker here, had this idea for, what was it, GameStoryGraveyard.com. Something like that. That would be great.
And that was, of course, because Ventura's home run, gopher ball pitch to I forgot who hit the home run now.
I remember
Brandon Moss.
It was Moss. It was Moss.
He had a couple. Yeah, he had a game.
Yep.
He had a game.
So
you know what you remind me of, and we've sort of talked about this before, but it is true that those teams represented so much that just crazy pendulum these things swing on one or two little things. And the best example I can give is that Houston game, the elimination game too, where it was 7 straight hits and one that should have been called a hit that I think was ruled an error, but went off the mound.
bad hop off.
Correa.
Kendrys Morales.
But but it's true. And again, this is maybe a little too much inside sport writing, but we had, gotten into the planning stage of what we're writing when they're down at that point. And as I recall, I was going to write how every September move they made backfired, and you were going to write how the whole season wasn't worth it, something to that effect. And then that's not what we wrote.
Yeah, and you know what though? If they lost Game 4 of the division series, I think I would stand by that column. I think they had to do what they did. There were so many flashes of. I remember there was like a self-awareness on that team in some ways. They would talk about like, we ignore the noise and all that stuff, but. I don't remember which game this was, but it was one of the many crazy bonkers, win probability goes up to the 90s and into the teens kind of game. And there were two Royals players that were walking back to the dugout, and one of them turned to the other one and said something to the effect of, well, we bailed him out again. And I still don't know if they were joking. I think they were, but I'm absolutely not sure. But it didn't matter, because that seemed to be the feeling of like, no matter what. I mean, you remember the crazy thing about Alcides Escobar swinging at every freaking first pitch? And, it became this joke in the dugout about, well, we're going to win tonight. He swung at the first pitch again. And, it was the wrong guy to have in the leadoff spot. And that's the wrong approach to take as a leadoff hitter. But it worked out. It absolutely
you create your own reality sometimes, right?
Out.
Mentally.
Yeah. That is so, that is such a metaphor, just, so illustrative of how they did it. It was just like every convention says A, the Royals were going to do B, and it was going to work out.
One thing to add, and I'd be far more interested in hearing what you guys say about this than I have to say, but it was fascinating to me as the new guy coming in. Even from that perspective, I had a little bit of a sense of the meaning of this after all that time. I mean, in fact, I think I've said this before on one of our podcasts. It felt like, for me, it actually fast-forwarded me into living here because you felt so connected to the community. But I wonder for two people who were here that whole time. Actually, you weren't quite here yet, were you?
Not in 85.
First World Series,
Nope.
but you were. I mean, that's got to be why this will always be in your top things you'll share with people about stories you got to cover.
Look, like, it's not unusual for teams to win World Series 30 years apart, right? But what is unusual is for those 30 years to be filled with so much hopelessness. And, I remember doing a story, and it must have been 2006 or maybe 2007, but just of people who were adults. It was in the last part of the first decade of this century. People who were adults who were, big Royals fans and born after 1985. And just sort of why the hell why? Why do you love this team that just is not loving you back? And I remembered all those people during that run. I corresponded with a lot of them. It was like your 30 or however you want to say, 15, 20, whatever years of pain or just of emptiness, of just, liking a team that just consistently went nowhere and consistently did things like, trade Carlos Beltran because he wanted $25 million instead of 24 when he went behind Scott Boris's back to negotiate a contract extension, and trade him for one of my favorite people in the world, Mark Teahan, but John Buck and Mike Wood. I mean, just, keep doing things like that. And when you see, people, you'd see a father and a son, mother and daughter, and you'd see, like, I went to 1985 with my dad or mom, and now I'm here with my, son or daughter. Just stuff like that is just really like, I'll get chills, like, just remembering some of that stuff. It was amazing.
I remember talking to a lot of fans starting the night in Chicago when the Royals clinched the playoff position, and talking to fans after the game, and then starting to correspond with fans about their memories. And Sam, I got a lot of that. Just people from Southwest Missouri and Central Kansas about how they spent their evenings listening to Fred and Denny on Royals broadcasts, and those were their summer evenings.
Yeah.
And how just having championship baseball, meaningful baseball, brought back that feeling to them, and it was really, really I mean, I did. I got choked up. Well, I've told you this before. That night in Chicago, I got back to the hotel and I called my kids.
Yeah.
Because I just remember we went to games, when they were kids, and they loved going to Kauffman Stadium. There's not much as a sports writer, there's not much you can do with your kids in terms of taking them to games, because you're working, right? But we used to go to Royals games, and I knew how happy they were, and I just wanted to talk to them about it.
Yeah, I mean, there were a million stories like that, and just any one of them was incredible, and any one of them is a story about, like I remember, this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but when they drafted Aaron Crow in the first round, obviously that didn't work out, but Aaron Crow grew up as a Royals fan.
In Topeka.
And Washburn Rural maybe, but anyway, and in, the teleconference after they drafted him, somebody said, who was your favorite player? And I think he said Johnny Damon. And that's when it hit me, like, this is a guy who's, old enough to be drafted by a baseball team, and he grew up loving this team because they were the closest one. And I was remembering, like, Johnny Damon, what was the best team that Johnny Damon ever played on, And, like, they scored some runs for a few years when they had the outfield, but it was garbage for most of the time. The staff ERA would be in the fives.
It was a no chance of a good team.
And then people like Aaron Crow, not the ones that didn't become professional ball players, right? Grew up knowing nothing but disappointment. And, 2003 was the only winning season between the strike and 2013, right? Mm-hmm. And for people that don't remember it, it's hard to explain, like, just how unexpected that season was, and how, in hindsight, how unlikely and just I've come to call it the great fluke of 2003, because that team signed Jose Lima sight unseen from independent ball because his fastball reached like 84 or something like that. And then he won his first 5 starts or something like that. I mean, it was just all these things worked out for that team. And that was the best team in 2 decades. And they won 83 games and finished like 3rd or 4th in a bad division. So then for this to actually happen, and for a fan base that's grown used to all these rebuilds, it just turns into dust. And now all of a sudden it was clicking. And it's easy to forget this now, but in July of 2014, there were a hell of a lot of people in this town who wanted Dayton Moore and Ned Yost fired and the whole thing blown up.
Right.
A whole lot.
Didn't they fall like a game below 500?
Yeah, they were below 500 after the All-Star break. I think it was like 47 and 48 or something like that. And a whole bunch of people, I remember there was a lot of columns being written about, because they didn't do anything at the trade deadline that year.
Right.
And, you got to do something. You either need to trade James Shields and start planning for 2018 or whatever, or you need to, there was a hot outfielder, it was Alex Rios, wasn't it? That people wanted the Royals to trade for. You got to do something. And they did. Not only did they not do something, but then Eric Hosmer breaks his hand like 2 hours after the trade deadline. And now, he's maybe their best player, one of their best players, and now you got to play Billy Butler at first base. Woo, and then Billy Butler played great at first base.
Did, right?
He hit home runs. Vahe, you've noted this multiple times about, Raul Ibanez, who's basically signed just to be like, him and George Brett coming in as the hitting coach. They were just swag coaches. They were just trying to get these guys to believe. And I think he did that, but he also hit a home run in a game that the Royals won 1-0.
Yeah, that's
and
the one
that could be the difference.
That always stuck out to me.
That was in Oakland, right?
It was in Oakland,
yeah.
Right? And the difference there is quite simple, I guess, right? I mean, if you just put it in a vacuum, the Royals are playing that wild card game in Oakland. Mm-hmm. I think that's how that would have worked out. Probably the dynamics are different. Mm-hmm. And however it would have played out, it would have robbed us of the sheer joy of what it did for this town with that game played here the way it went.
Yeah.
James
Shields said that when he walked out to the mound in that game that he could literally feel the ground shaking, like literally feel in his feet the ground shaking because there was so much noise. Remember, this is how long ago it was. I remember in 2014 looking around, I was like, holy crap, like I've never seen this much blue. Like every once in a while there's a lot of fans, if it's opening day or, the Cardinals or whatever. I've never seen this many people in Royals stuff, gathered in one place ever.
No, the only time you saw the building like that, they were wearing Derek Jeter or Nomar Garcia Parra jerseys because the Yankees or Red Sox were in town.
Which is why Dayton felt like they won the World Series in 2013, right?
And this isn't lost on me either. I mean, we're talking about some of the very specific games, but there were out of body feelings kind of to be had for each of those postseason games. I mean, you can't believe they're here, fans are here. We're sort of taking that in as, absorption points or whatever you'd call it, and you could really feel it.
Oh, my gosh.
You could really feel it.
Because of that experience, because of what Kansas City felt after the parade was just phenomenal, and then the Sea of Blue at Union Station. Because of what this city felt that day, I have found myself since then previously not caring about who wins events and championships, but kind of inwardly pulling for teams that haven't won anything in a long, long time. So when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, when the Cleveland Cavaliers won the NBA championship, when the Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup, I just thought, great, those fans got to feel what the people in Kansas City felt. And you just tell by the parades that those guys threw that. And so, Chiefs fans, I'm thinking of you in that realm.
That's right.
All right, listen, great talk. When we come back, we've got one more big story of the decade, and we will move into the last couple years of whatever we're calling this decade. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners. Unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Guys, the Chiefs have been good for most of this decade. Since you got here, Vahe, 2013, Andy Reid arrived along with Alex Smith, John Dorsey, and they built a winning team right away. In fact, it was one of the great reverses that I can remember from 2-14 in the Javon Belcher year of 2012 to 11-5 in a playoff team in 2013. But as consistently good as the Chiefs have been since then, things changed in a pretty dramatic way in the 20. Let me get the draft year right. 2017 draft. Yep. Yes, thanks.
Sat a year, played a year.
Yep. And now we're here. Two. Of course, we were talking about Patrick Mahomes, the player that the Chiefs had never drafted. That type of guy. It was just a uber talented player, B, a quarterback. First time the Chiefs drafted a quarterback in the first round since Todd Blackledge in the early 80s. And things have never been the same around here. Listen, we're recording this. We are recording this before the Chiefs game at Chicago Sunday night, but we know the Chiefs have won the division. They're going to be in the playoffs, and I think ultimately, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs' season will be judged on what happens in the postseason. But up until now, given what he has accomplished so far, he is a transformational figure in the history of Kansas City sports. Look, do you have to have played 10 years to be that sort of person? I don't know, but the fact that he was the first NFL MVP in Chiefs history, the record-setting year of 2018, just the person that Patrick Mahomes is, and is as he's projected in Kansas City with his public figure as visible as he is just he's been a remarkable person for Kansas City and for the Chiefs. And again, I'll start with you, Sam, since you've been here longer. There hadn't been anybody quite like this.
No, I don't think even close. Just like perspective. shifting. The Chiefs have had a lot of stars. I mean, they've had Hall of Famers. Derek Thomas for a time was, the best pass rusher in the league. Tony Gonzalez for a long time was the best tight end. Jamal Charles for a time was the best or one of the best runners. They've had guys that are terrific, but not at that position, and also just not as just wildly, almost unimaginably dynamic and able to, turn nothing into a 4th and 9 against the Ravens last year. Just the 2-point conversion, against the Broncos. I mean, there's a million plays like that he's made already, and he's been playing for, a season and a half. I was thinking about this too. He is the only person in Kansas City sports. I'm pretty sure this is I've tried to think of others. I think he's the only person in Kansas City sports who I would bet has the same job at the end of this decade, at the end of the 2020s. And that's the other part of it too. Our oldest son is in kindergarten, and I feel like Patrick Mahomes is going to be the quarterback when my kindergartner is in high school. That's a pretty amazing thing.
You'll have to buy jerseys that are just another size up for for the next few years.
That's right. I've seen those kindergarten pictures too, by the way, and I mean, there's like half the classes in Mahomes jerseys. I'm like, this is weird, man. This is different.
One thing you're making me think of, it's sort of how he's looked at here. But the thing that's been interesting to me, and there's no easy way to measure this, but he's pretty popular coast to coast. Mm-hmm. And he's now kind of entwined with Kansas City coast to coast. I mean, people think of us when they think of him. And they think, the Kansas City treat, whatever, however you look at him. I was in Philadelphia when he got hurt against the Broncos, and all the people watching the game on TV were like bummed out. And they were like Eagles fans and Patriots fans. In Boston, my cousins and friends up there want to know everything they can about him. It's a little different than just being a really good player on a good team. I mean, he's obviously a national presence, probably in some ways that we don't know how to measure an international presence. Probably got a little whiff of that in Mexico City. I don't know, again, how we'd assess that exactly, but probably the only guy on the Kansas City sports scene, and you guys would know this better than me from all your time here, but kind of needs bodyguard or so with him out there because he's a guy who can't say no, but also because people are going to treat him like the Beatles.
Right.
And I'm sure in his heyday, whatever, name it, George Brett, I don't know who that person would be in their heyday. Bo Jackson?
He said the magic word.
Sorry, I know. I made
he knows
you melt.
the way into my heart.
Yeah. But surely there have been guys in the stratosphere, or women for that matter, in the stratosphere of sports figures here that people just won't run to or flock to quite the way they will to Patrick.
Yeah, I think you named probably the two, sort of it's cliche, but like rock stars that have played here. Tony Gonzalez, I think, got close. Derek Thomas, I think, got close. But George Brett was the best player in baseball for a time, and Bo Jackson was the biggest thing in sports for a time when he was playing. Half of his work life was in Kansas City. But it is different when it's 2019 and social media, at which Mahomes is great, by the way. It just makes things like this burn a little hotter, I think. I think George Brett. You guys might want to check me on this, but I think George Brett might have still enjoyed a night or two out at the Plaza or Westport, some of those things like after baseball games. And I don't think Patrick Mahomes can like walk into Kelly's just on a Friday night and just not blow the place up. It is. I think it's different now.
I think that's a great point. You're right. George Brett was for a time the best player in his sport, but when George played, the best player in a sport could do the things that George Brett did
that's right.
What he might do in the that can't happen. And that's, I'll tell you what, that's a phenomenon of this decade. Social media, Twitter. That's I listen. I'm veering off a little bit here, but I remember Larry Eustachy, the old Iowa State basketball coach, was one of the first ones to kind of get caught by social media, and those are we saw the consequences of that.
That stuff with Mahomes as well, like all that is magnified by George Brett is the best player in his sport for a time. But one baseball player, even if it's George Brett in his prime or Mike Trout now or whatever, can't have the impact that the quarterback for a football team can. You know, I mean, and look, they've got Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and Mitchell Schwartz and, you know, other guys that are really, really good on that offense. But even if it was just a bunch of, you know, guys named Fred, the other 10 positions, like you got Mahomes, you feel like you've got a chance to score some points.
Am I right in suggesting that we're still in something of a honeymoon period with Patrick Mahomes, that he's 1-1 as a playoff starter?
Yeah.
And if that, you know, if that becomes a negative, you know, a losing record in the postseason, that maybe, you know, we'll start to feel a little differently about him. Not to say that, you know, we don't, you know, appreciate the greatness that he is, but how much of what he'll ultimately mean to Chiefs fans depends on how far the Chiefs go in the postseason. Not just this year, but in future years.
All of it. I mean, I think they remember Dan Marino as a really good quarterback in Miami, but I think they also remember that he never won a Super Bowl and never got back to one, right? After
well, he just went to one his second year.
Yeah, never got back to one after,
right.
You know, like, and you think in that second year, you think with Mahomes that this is always going to happen, and Marino's career is kind of the great, you know, sort of cautionary tale. I was just talking about this with somebody else the other day, actually, about, you know, Mahomes hasn't had to deal with a lot of, he's had injuries, right? But he hasn't had to deal with that kind of adversity of, you know, the biggest disappointment he's had as a pro happened when he hung 31 or whatever it was on Bill Belichick in the second half, and the game was lost because, you know, a guy lined up off sides and the defense couldn't, you know, stop the other team, you know, in the playoffs and all that. And that's, you know, his hands are clean.
He didn't have the ball. He didn't have the ball at the end.
Yeah, and so he hasn't. I'm curious. That'll happen, right? Every great quarterback, you know, has had those disappointments, but I don't think we've seen anything in Mahomes's, you know, sort of character or the way that he presents himself to believe that he won't handle that well.
An interesting side point of this is, it's right along the lines of the question you're asking, Blair. I mean, one of the things that he's created, the reason he's created such excitement is you sort of believe anything's possible with him. And at some point, and we're just in year 2 here, and it maybe won't happen this year, but I mean, at some point, if anything possible doesn't translate to getting to a Super Bowl, then it becomes less a point of that, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, as of now, I think he's got a little cushion here. I don't think they've ever lost a game because of him.
Yeah.
To this point, I think they've won only a few times without him being good, really good. Yeah, maybe
the Colts, that's as close as it's gotten. But that was like week 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
Still on the bum ankle.
And yeah. So I mean, you know, the arrows just all point up that way. But you're right. At some point, he needs that on his ledger to you feel like promise fulfilled. Right.
He can be a Hall of Fame quarterback and not have won a Super Bowl.
Right. Just like Andy Reid can be a Hall of Fame coach and not have won a Super Bowl, right? Yeah. But let's bear in mind, Andy, he's 2-5 for the Chiefs in postseason now, right?
Yep.
So that translates to 2 Chiefs postseason wins in a quarter century. So you know you want to see them build on that.
Yeah, and I always point this out. Maybe not always, but I know I've pointed this out a time or two before on this fine podcast program. But you, Vahe, wrote that you believe that Andy Reid would win a Super Bowl in Kansas City before the arrival of Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
And I think I agree. I certainly agree with you now. You know, it seems, you don't want to say inevitable, but certainly likely, but likely doesn't matter. You know, because I think about this too, and maybe this is just being conditioned of living in Kansas City and seeing Chiefs seasons for all my life. But think about this possible playoff path where, you know, the Chiefs, let's just say they're the number 3 seed. They beat the Steelers or whoever it is. Then they go to New England and they win there. They win a playoff game in Foxborough. And now they've beaten the Patriots twice in one season. And Tom Brady's 104 years old, and that's done. And then you go and you get bossed around in Baltimore, and you kind of feel like one king of the AFC has just been replaced by a tougher, younger, faster version.
And you missed your window?
Yeah, I mean that is that scenario is on the table.
Yeah, heck it is.
Absolutely on the table.
Well, look, one other interesting thing about, and Blair, knowing you might know this off the top of your head, but so what's the oldest a coach has been to win his first either championship or Super Bowl, right? I mean, if Andy does win one.
It's the most years coaching. I remember I looked that up. I don't know about the age.
Most years coaching without having one. He would be.
Yeah.
He would take that role.
Yeah, I don't know about the age.
But I think the reason I'm thinking this is a guy like Tom Landry went some years being accused of not being able to win the big one, right? I mean,
he did. That's right.
Until the early 70s. I guess, was he the Cowboys' original coach?
Yes, he was.
So,
yep.
Decade plus in that, but we're talking, this is more than 20 years now at it for
that's
Andy,
right. Most coaches don't get the opportunity to hang around as long as they, and he wore out his welcome in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And sure. And I think he's earned these opportunities, right? Like he had the sustained success in Philly, and then the Chiefs. And can I say this too? Like when we're talking about the Chiefs, it is about Patrick Mahomes, but I've always thought that nobody wants to hear owners praised, really, right? If we're just being honest, it's a lot more fun to criticize. But Clark Hunt, who otherwise I don't think has had that much of an impact, but he had his finest hour in 2012. And, that team bottomed out, and Clark can share some of the blame for all of that. He should have had the people skills to see that Scott Pioli and Todd Haley weren't going to work, for instance, and he should have been more in touch to know how badly things were going before 2012. But when that happened, I think he had his fine. He was aggressive. He was assertive. He was direct. He flew to Philadelphia, and everybody wanted Andy Reid. Like if he was going to coach, Cardinals, Chargers were both open, and those were heavily mentioned with him. Andy's grew up in L.A. Arizona's got a lot of advantages, obviously. And there may have been another team or two that was in on Andy, and Clark got him. And Clark got him because of his presentation and because of the history of the Chiefs and all those things, and replaced what had become, at least in that moment, the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL, and replace it with the stability that Clark Hunt had always talked about wanting. And, owners, I think, probably take too much blame and credit, like both ways, but that was just an absolutely imperative moment for the Chiefs because, if they're not as steady as they have been with Andy, are they in a position to make that deal? Or are they positioned to get the best out of Patrick Mahomes? I mean, it was just, there's a lot of little moments that feed into bigger moments, but that was certainly one of them.
Well, this is year 7 for Andy Reid. Technically year 3 with Patrick Mahomes, and so it's half of his Philadelphia tenure, right? 14 years in Philly, because this is Andy's 21st year as an NFL coach.
When I was looking this up on my phone, I'm sorry, but about the age and how many seasons. So how old is Andy? Is he like 59, 60?
I want to say he's 61, 62, but he might. I'll look that up on my thing.
Okay, so Dick Vermeil was 63 when he won the Super Bowl with the Rams
20 seasons ago.
Yeah, hadn't coached as much. Hadn't coached as many years
had been out
as Andy has, but he was older when he won his first Super Bowl.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, this podcast has lasted almost a decade.
By the way, Andy Reid is 61.
Okay. Very good. With that, we will bring this podcast, this decade review, to an end. Quite a decade in Kansas City sports, and I have been just blessed to share press boxes, press rows with Vahe Gregorian and Sam Mellinger, and gentlemen, we will see you in the next decade. Links to our coverage of these stories can be found in the show notes. Big thanks to Derek Donovan for producing today's show. And let us know what you think of SportsBeat KC. Leave a comment or suggestion where you can do those things. We'd appreciate it. Hey, for the first time since we started this as a daily enterprise in July, I will not say tune in Wednesday for a new SportsBeat KC presented by Big O Tires. We're going to take off on Christmas Day. But may I suggest some recent episodes? Last week we chatted with U.S. Women's National Soccer Team coach Vladko Andonovski. Earlier this month, former Chiefs great Bobby Bell stopped by to chat about his glory days and these Kansas City Chiefs. Pick any day, and I think you'll enjoy the show. I know we enjoy bringing it to you. Have a great Christmas and holiday season, and we'll be back on Thursday with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.